Thank you, Speaker. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. I grew up in rural areas my entire childhood. I know what it is to work with weapons and to survive in rural areas with guns. The role they have for hunting. I knew many people like my family who were poor, and it may be the only food you had. I also know of use such as those that the good member of the 13th noted in managing his buffalo herds. I believe in gun rights, and I believe in our Second Amendment rights. And I also believe in our First Amendment rights. May I read, Speaker?
Please proceed.
The First Amendment provides that Congress make no law respecting any establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. It protects the freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government of redress of grievances. This law is about the balance of the First and Second Amendment of our Constitution and the corresponding Constitution we have in our state. Our forefathers saw fit to put a Second Amendment in for protection of our government and property. But they chose to put a First Amendment in first. I assume in all the time and turmoil of drafting that Constitution, they had a long deliberation about what would be the first statement of a country. This is democracy. The first documented the way our democracy was documented. They chose this as the most paramount of those amendments to that Constitution. They put this first. The Capitol is the people's place for safe assembly, and they have their voices heard, as are our courts, where they have redress with our governance. It's clearly stated in our First Amendment. And the public spaces within our communities are the people's place, paid for with the people's dollars, for community and safe assembly, and a place to have their voices heard and protest in grievance to their government, as noted in the First Amendment. I'm a mother, and as a child of the 80s and 90s, I'm aware of when Columbine happened, and I'm aware that we had the 20th anniversary, and we've had 165 mass occurs by gun violence in our country since then. When my oldest was in first grade, she had a shelter in place at her public school. Because when a neighbor was walking down the street with open carry, the proximity of that open carry and proximity to the school prompted them to have to do shelter in place. She and her classmates were safe, as were the educators who took care of our children that day. Our school did a wonderful job of communicating to us about what happened. And I cried much of the night because my first grader over dinner told us about what she learned about what it was to climb under your desk and stay really, really quiet in case someone walks down the halls with a gun in a public school. We're in a moment where we're going to have to take consideration of the balance of our public spaces, our First Amendment rights, and our Second Amendment rights. I think this law does an excellent job of being specific in what it is to have a balance of your gun rights in our state, and also let people assemble without worrying about them raising their voice to what they need in their governance and in the spaces in which they do that they are not equal and safe. I ask you to join me in a yes vote.